Uh, all right, thank you everyone joining me here. And this is a topic which is closest to my heart. I don't know how many of you know. I started as a wealth manager uh, 12 years back and quickly realized that that time it was all about mis-selling and more mis-selling of products, and realized that this country really needs financial education, both for professionals as well as for, of course, for clients. And I got into financial education then. But having started with this field, it's always remained close to my heart, and I've worked with a lot of private wealth companies in India and outside on helping them recruit talent on their learning and development initiatives, on various other leadership initiatives for the senior management teams. And what I've realized over the years, of course, again and again, is that talent, is the biggest, finding the right talent in wealth management is, I think, one of the biggest issues which most of these wealth management companies face. Finding clients and retaining them probably is much more easier than finding and retaining the right talent. So on this premise, I would like to start this session, and would like to know from my panelists, who all have taken different routes to reach where they are. Arpita, if there has to be a list of women wealth leaders in India, your name will be there on the top for sure. Started off with HSBC, was a star banker, and then got into a completely new setup. I think Centrum was a startup, the wealth team. She's built it up into a fantastic business, and Centrum today is, you keep reading about them everywhere, and with some very top names joining the board, the team also getting into a lot of other functions. I think this is a company which is to watch out for in the next few years. Anupam, so Arpita has of course been started with a big bank, but then got into a startup. Anupam has been with a big bank, but again, he was the one who set up the private wealth business as a founding team member of ICICI Securities, and I'm sure must have had his own learnings and challenges. Bhavesh, of course, comes from a completely non-wealth background and is now heading, for the last 3 months, heading the wealth management team at Aditya Birla. So it's a pretty interesting panel here. And to start with, let me just quickly ask each of you for your individual stories. I just want to know how you've reached, where you've reached, and what are the key learnings, and what are the mistakes that you made to become a wealth leader that you are today. So Arpita, can we start with you?
Sure. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for some very, very complimentary words, Aditya. I don't know if that's all. Yes, it's been a journey, as you rightly said, from being a part of a large format, which taught me a lot, to then actually roughing it out in a startup sort of a scenario. From a personal journey point of view, the initial couple of years were with amongst the largest industrial companies in India, Tata Steel, on the shop floor, and taught me the biggest leadership lesson of my life. So you were dealing with a team where the average age was possibly 15, 20 years more than yours, language that you didn't understand. The choice of language in team meetings would be language that I wasn't very comfortable with, and you were expected to get work done out of them. And I think the biggest hands-on experience on negotiation and getting things done from a team that wasn't ready to accept you as a leader started on there, and that was reasonably exciting. And I don't think I've had too many such moments in my life when I walked into the first team discussion and no one would be ready to vacate a chair there, and so what is it that you want to tell us, and all of that. So it was an interesting, exciting experience. Changed my field to then into financial services. HSBC was a great organization. It is amongst the in our campus, in most of the category 1 schools, it would be a tier 1 company, and it was exciting to be a part of that. It was exciting to see the metamorphosis of an organization from service-led premium bank to a lot more to a sales organization, and that was actually changing the DNA of the company that we worked for. Uh, I thought it was a great journey. It was a part of the country talent pool and stuff, and you thought you were doing really, really well till we started out on our own, and it struck me that the last 10 years was actually amounted to pretty much nothing when it comes to the real world of business and getting your hands dirty and getting started. So that's been a very and I think what's been exciting, and the previous organization taught me a lot. Taught it was a large organization, and you had to manage the dynamics of Hong Kong and London and India and get stuff going. And an organization like that with a matrix like that teaches. It's a huge amount of learning that you sort of go through. But in a startup format, when you realize that your visiting card has, so for example, anyone who's a part of large format, when you put out a visiting card, as was in my earlier role, the visiting card would do about 80% of the job. You are from a blue-blooded organization, and that sort of talks about it. To a conversation here, when the visiting card comes out the last, and the ability of creating a personal brand, it can be overwhelming, and it can be exciting. And depending on what is it that you connect with, is been the single most important learning over the last 5.5 years or so. For us, it's been a lot about, I remember some of you seem very, very young, so maybe in the first decade of your careers here. I remember in campuses, it was very, very important if you were with a UBS or a Credit Suisse, and that was a fantastic placement, or any of these Ivy big bulge firms. I think that has moved. That has its huge charm as well, but that has moved to being whether a particular person is with which sort of a brand. So, for example, an Aditya here with Aditya with UBS, and UBS draws sheen from Aditya, or UBS lends its sheen to Aditya, and Aditya lending his sheen to UBS. That has been a paradigm shift. And we have sort of firmly believed in that. So we've built a company, we've built an organization that's anchored around personal brands. And I think that's where we've been able to sort of attract talent. We've had near zero attrition in the last 5.5 years. In a company that's grown, say, 40-50% year on year, I think the most beautiful part has been that, this whole concept of work-life balance, and I'm going a little off, track here, because this is something that I'm very, very passionate about. I pretty much handle I don't know if I call it the HR function, but the talent function for my organization as well. So, this whole concept of work-life balance, I think, is very, very warped. It is one life, whether you are so if something at work goes wrong, I'm not too sure if you'll be able to sleep easy. And if there's something personally you're not comfortable with, I don't know how will it not affect your, your professional life. So it's one life. Can we help you get a balance in that? So, as a mother, a PTA for my daughter is at least as important, a very, very, large client meeting as well, and that's what we tell all our employees. So I think that's where this whole thing of the journey from being, I wouldn't call it a cog in the wheel, but in a large format, and getting into entrepreneurial journey where the buck stops with you, where you are responsible for all the actions that you take, good or bad. A lot of professionals are sort of crossing over, and so in a personal capacity, you sort of reinvent ourselves. I've forgotten the labels of whether you're a private banker or an investment banker or a taxation consultant or a lawyer or offshore consultant or whatever it is, or credit guy. Ultimately, if the client situation requires you to bid, the organization supports you into picking up the relevant sort of skill set. So that's not a very short answer to the career so far. So I've been lucky, enjoyed being a part of a large format, and I've been extremely lucky also having played a part in setting up an organization. I think as I speak with talent almost on a daily basis, I see a lot more professionals wanting to switch roles either sides, and that's very, very healthy. I don't think that was something that was really heard of about 5 years back or 8 years back.
Sure. So if you had to just go through the journey again, are there any things that you want to do differently?
Right. I think the obvious one after I've said all of this is I would have wanted to take the plunge a lot early in my life. No, okay. So that's in a lighter note. I got a huge amount of grounding in my early organization. But I think every single professional, from a very personal point of view, whichever, wherever, the joy of entrepreneurship is something else. So if I had to relive it over again, I would have wanted to do it a lot earlier.
Sure. Anupam?
Okay. Hi everyone. Good morning. So I joined from campus in ICICI. So it's been 16 odd years at ICICI. But I've had multiple roles here. Started with retail banking in the initial years, as most of us then, it was early 2000. Had a short stint on the institutional side. So did some bit of institutional sales. And then in 04, I moved into the international private banking business of ICICI. And I thought that was the big change for me. I moved overseas in 04. And I was there till 09, so almost a 5-year stint. And from an ICICI Bank culture, moving overseas, and those were early days then, we didn't even have a license at that point of time. This is an incident which is very close to my heart. So this typically in ICICI you have the open job posting. So you apply for it and you get it, and it said Middle East. So you would you would think that maybe it must be Dubai. And finally, when it came, it was for Oman. And I had no clue where Oman was at that point of time. We were just out of college. And finally, then my boss used to be Nimesha, who's now the MD for ICICI Prudential Mutual Fund. And, he said, the choice is yours, whether you would want to be the country head and make a mark for yourself, or would you want to be in Dubai and be one of the bankers. And I then chose Oman. During the 5 years that I was, we transformed the way private banking was done at ICICI. I had then, during my stint, we were operating at a network of private banking clients, which was the who's who at that point of time in the country. I had Mr. Kamath coming over, Chanda coming over, everybody who mattered at ICICI then. And, so the point that I was making is that, at least with me, the firm trusted much more than maybe at a very early age when I thought maybe I was not capable to take on those challenges. And the 5 years were really beautiful. We did phenomenal business. 25% of our business at that point of time used to come from non-Indians, so local institutions, all dollar products. So a different facet of this thing. And from there again, in the true ICICI style, they thought that when, Anup Bagchi, who's now the MD CEO for ICICI Securities, he moved into ISEC. So he was the head of private banking then for ICICI Bank. So when he moved into ISEC, he thought that I could come over and, set up the India business here. And it's been a fantastic 7-year journey. Today we are amongst the well-respected names in the country on the private banking side. So 3 distinct stints. One was in Delhi when I initially started in ICICI. From there moved on to the overseas business right from, and while we went as bankers, but the kind of work that we did and with ownership, right from getting a license to engaging with regulators, to setting up the business, and when people today here from an Indian context come and say that, we don't have clients, we don't have book, etc. And I say that, boss, we didn't even have visiting cards when we went there, leave aside any client. So right from the first client to the business that we built was all from scratch. And I think that is the ownership that we brought in here. So while we are operating with a large brand, but I would echo what she said on the ownership and the entrepreneurship, bit, is that we all feel for it. We don't see it as a job, and very nice things that, Arpita spoke about one life. Finally, at the end of the day, this is the only opportunity you have. You are at a career point where, you will have to make a mark, and which is where I think what drives all of us to do what we do.
Sure. Bhavesh, coming to you, unlike Arpita and Anupam, both of whom have been into banking, finance and wealth, started your career with Canon, Xerox, then moved to insurance and now to wealth. So how's the journey been?
It's been fantastic. I think, I would probably echo what Anupam just said. We both were in Muscat almost at a different time zone. But, so I started off in '89, and The only reason I got a job in Xerox was because I was the only guy who was willing to go and sell copiers in Patalganga and Khopoli. And when I was interviewed by the business head, and he said, would you go to Patalganga, Khopoli? I used to live in Santa Cruz, and honest to God, I thought it was right next to Borivali. So I said, okay, I mean, I'll just do it. And the first day I went to Khopoli, I mean, you know, in that ST bus, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I did that for about 2 years, extremely tough, extremely tough. I mean, I must say that with the Xerox culture, you know, the targets would be the same, whether it's me in Patalganga, Khopoli, or a guy in Nariman Point. And then I moved to Muscat, where Anupam was there, but like I said, different time zone. So,
Quite
and
different.
92 to 97, and there again I got a very tough assignment of, you know, again selling photocopiers to all the ministries and stuff like that. Then I came back, and I think being a Gujarati, I guess, you know, numbers come pretty natural to you. And I thought, you know, financial services is the place that you want to really go. And I had options between an ICICI Bank or an ABN AMRO, but then I chose BSLI, mainly because of the fact that I understand the institution business pretty well, and I saw a great opportunity. So one of the toughest assignments that I think I've seen, I mean, at least in my career, which spans about 27 years, of which 14 years in the Aditya Birla Group, going to an institution, you know, and asking them to park their pension funds is not a joke. I mean, it's something which will break your sales guys' back. Extremely tough. You know, it takes like, on an average, between 2 years to 6 years to convert a deal, because the ticket sizes are fairly large. You know, the average ticket size is about 10 crores, and whether you're interacting with Rajiv Bansal, who was the Infosys CFO, or Mohandas Pai, or Bala, or Mr. Diostale, you know, these guys are not going to budge. You know, for come what may, they're just not going to budge. So the whole, you know, interaction, and I honestly, I mean, I didn't even know, you know, that the GSEC and the price they have an inverted yield curve and stuff like that. I had no clue whatsoever, right? But I thought, okay, you know, let's just do this, you know. And then, you know, I took over as the head in 2006 at a very tough time. Markets were doing well, but we lost a lot of people, some of them to these guys. And I took over a team of just 13 people, and then we quickly kind of just turned the whole business around. And it's been like a super journey. And then I got a little serious on the whole wealth bit. So I went to Columbia Business School. I studied there for about a year. It was great to be in the same classroom where, you know, you had Benjamin Graham or Warren Buffett studying there. And I read a lot. So last 3 or 4 years, I've kind of just dedicated myself to just reading. I must have read at least about 200 books, and still reading, still continue to read them. I have almost about 100 books in my library, which I'm supposed to still read and catch up with. So recently, Ajay and Mr. Birla thought that, you know, maybe this guy's a better guy to, you know, take over and run the show. So I've just kind of taken over. It's been about 3.5 months. I'm trying to get a grip. I mean, these guys are obviously the stalwarts. But I think exciting times ahead, great brand, a fantastic team. We have, I would say, a decent size of business, but I think the opportunity is very, very large.
Sure. So coming back to the topic now, I mean, let me put my first question to the panel. What are the biggest challenges you're finding today in recruiting talent in the wealth management teams? Are you getting the guys with the right orientation, or is it really a big mismatch between expectations? So, Arpita?
Actually, you know, one of the first things, and actually the only thing that I look for when we are engaging with people wanting to, is are you getting a person with a scientist DNA or a sports person DNA? And I'll just explain that a little better. You know, a scientist starts with something called a null hypothesis, and if that is proved wrong, then what you are out to prove is proved correct. So you start with working on assumptions that this is not right, and in the event of you being proved right is where your hypothesis is tested. The sportsman, any doubt is a poison. So you throw yourself to a situation and see if you can find a solution towards it. So for us, the mindset, the attitude is a lot more important than how sound technical knowledge do you come with, how much of experience that you've had. It may not mean much if you're not a sportsman, if you're not willing to throw yourself at the problem and at the opportunity, and whether it overwhelms or excites you the other way. So for us, I would think, you know, I've not had too many situations, you know, the fact that we've had zero attrition, and we you know, initially from about a team of 5 to 7, that was the initial team that we were. We're about 210 now. And so the choice was between buying out talent versus investing in the current talent and getting them to grow with us. We chose the latter because I think that was DNA consistent. That's where you're able to imbibe the values of the organization in the person as well. So I don't think there is a mismatch, but it takes a whole lot of time to be able to understand the person. For us, understanding the person, individual, understanding the value system, what drives them, do they still have the, if I'm looking at, for a particular role, if I'm looking at a person who's headed that position for the last 10 years and therefore has a certain amount of understanding and perspective, and another person who is not there as yet but will give whatever to reach there, for us, the second one is a lot more important attribute than the first one. So I don't think there's a mismatch per se. If you wanted to set up a factory and look at people coming in and going, the attrition rates are very, very high, and what drives person A may not work with person B. For a boutique like ours, it's a very involved process. Every single person who comes in through the door gets to meet at least 5 people. It's usually understanding the person first and then getting to see whether it fits or not. So it takes a lot of patience, but I don't think I would think that there's a huge amount of mismatch. Especially now you see a lot of people wanting to adopt anchor. The business that we are in, more than anything else, is in a relationships business. And the longevity of a person in a specific role is actually a very significant determinant of how far the person will go in life. So if you have a person who is willing to drop anchor with the network ecosystem that he has created, I think that, and you've got them aligned, that pretty much sort of seals it. So yes, you don't have ready-made talent working through the door at all. Even if there's ready-made talent walking in through the door, they'll actually वो थोड़ा लेप उतारने में time लगता है in terms of the previous, if I'm here, I have to sell and go. That sort of an approach to a lot more advisory, to a lot more longer-term orientation sort of approach. So I don't think there's ready-made talent available, but if you look hard enough, you'll find people who are consistent with the DNA that you're trying to create here. And we've been able to get the kind of people that we wanted to.
So have you been hiring only the experienced people with some books or also freshers? I mean, how's the
freshers
composition?
as well. So, initially it was, because it was a startup and it was not a bank or a broking firm where you sort of top slice customers, so you went and hunted for every single customer. There were 3 sort of, in a very simplistic manner, 3 pockets of people that they were. One was a relatively inexperienced, the sales distribution machinery for any financial services firms. If I've come here, I'll sell something. That sort of an approach. Great in sales, but with very limited understanding and experience in financial markets. And on the other hand, you had the arrived in life bulk, the bulge firms, private bankers. Compensation very, very significant, and having spent 10, 15 years, and it would take a lot of time to actually undo what they had and get them to sort of connect with the organization DNA. And we didn't have the top dollars to afford initially, even now. So, so therefore, and it's a 35% of the company is owned by employees. It was an employee-owned firm. The first one would not have just done justice to the proposition that we had, would not have presented the proposition that we wanted to do to the clients in the correct manner. And the private banker arrived in life variety was not consistent with what we were trying to create there. So it was actually the middle pot that we went for. And those people, so people with, in some range of book who have grown to 3.5 times of that book over the last 4-5 years. That's the kind of team which is out core with us. Now, given that there is a limited pool of talent that is available, we try and nurture people from within. Also open to freshers who have sufficient fire in the belly for them. No one, is born with a book. So that's really not a constraint. But if you're really willing to do whatever it takes to create the relevant ecosystem, are resourceful enough, that works. And now obviously with the firm where, we've got, very, very senior bankers now dropping anchor and all of that. And, recently we won the Asia Money Best Private Bank in the Year, which was a client vote. These sort of validations coming our way, a lot of senior private bankers wanting to come and drop anchor. As long as we think the DNA is consistent and they want to help create a franchise that all of us will be proud of, it's fine. So both of that works, but from a, kind of people that we want to look out for are really the middle pot, who've had about 7, 8, 10 years of experience, have a network, but more important, have still the hunger in them to go and, So, I remember in HSBC, we used to have this global training, which was a 2-month orientation for everyone. And then they used to every year celebrate performance for people. I remember it was only in the Asian countries, especially from India, where the average age of someone who was celebrated was maybe in their 30s. In the other private banks, you actually had people coming in second generation also. So they were private bankers who had passed on their books to their next in the family. And that was a done thing, and it was unheard of here. So that's a very, very, in a large format, for example, our attrition used to be 35-40%, because what next? What next after 2 years, 2.5 years? In the initial 6 months, you're trying to get a handle on the job. Last 6 months, you're looking for another job, and 1.5, 2 years. And if you continue in the same job, how do you get the feeling that you're growing? That are amongst the, so that kind of a thinking is not something that, is consistent with what we're trying to build here. I think overall also from a firm point of view, from an industry point of view, that change is happening. It's not seen as a job to be occupied for 2 years in your career. It is seen as a profession where you can build, grow, perhaps take it to a stage where it can move on to the next generation as well, in a matter of speaking. And that changes the alignment completely. You know you're going to be around when there's a shit hits the fan. And there will always be a situation when the shit will hit the fan. There will be products which will do what they were not designed to do, and you're going to be there, you're going to be facing the music. You cannot say, mere pehle wale ne kiya and I had absolutely no idea and I'll try and figure out what went wrong. With that orientation, you don't need a huge sales audit machinery. If you know the person, and I am a relationship manager first, is when I meet a client and I tell him invest in a 7-year product and most likely I'll be around when it is maturing, the kind of conversation and expectation setting that I'll do is very, very different from what I will do if I were to know that 7 saal mein to mujhe rehna nahi hai. So, someone else will come and explain that sort of a shit. So
I think
yes.
that's one problem I've seen, especially in financial services. People are playing a 20-20 when it comes to a career.
Right.
They don't realize it's a test and that they have to be here for long term. And I'm sure you've given an even better perspective that, this is a business that you can actually also give it to the next generation. So the span becomes more broader. Sorry, Anupam, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so I would echo whatever she said. So when we started, obviously we also, we realized that, this is ISEC. This was not bank wherein clients would walk in. It's a non-bank entity, and hence you would have to reach out and get clients. But we believed that our proposition and the brand was extremely superior, and we could reach out to clients, and we would, if you're able to present and communicate the manner in which it needs to, we'll get the buy-in. And hence, our model initially of hiring was that we would want to look at people from, the HSBC Premier, City Gold, those kind of, segment, which is typically 7 years, WorkX, the bulge bracket, from the talent pool availability perspective. And we get them people again with the right attitude, fire in the belly, because that's critical. So there are 3 aspects to it. You need to have the right attitude, you need to have relationship skills, and you need to have domain expertise. Yeah. The combination of 3 would make a successful banker. But the first criteria is that, do you have it in you? If that is MS, then the other 2 really do not count. And as we were, expanding, we figured out that you could get domain quickly, because this is no rocket science. It's, I think, overhyped. It's common sense. If there is a smart, intelligent guy, anyone can, read up, and if really the will is there. And largely what we figured out is that it is the function of time to build a relationship that is critical, and which is where we thought that we would need to reach out to people who have, long relationship, and which is when I think from a hiring perspective, we were critical to look at the vintage that one person would spend in a particular firm. I think that was sacrosanct, because otherwise, you're just hopping jobs, and you would just you would not have any relationship per se. You may say on book that you may have a large AUM, but finally you may know the clients will not know you or do business with you. So that was critical. And the third aspect was the domain bit, which I think is easy to with common sense one can learn and able to communicate. So to us, I think 2 things are critical. One is whether you have the right attitude to really go, and she spoke about sports person attitude. I thought that's a fair comment. You need to have it in you to really go and win it. And second is how much time you've spent to nurture those relationships. I think those are critical.
What kind of learning and development, or I would say continuing education initiatives you guys are taking at your end?
So private banking, is a handicrafts business. It's no assembly line. And the learning typically happens through, to me, from an apprenticeship perspective, It is not that you could sit in a classroom and learn about it, So we have this, the structure of the organization is also that you have a mentorship program. You have someone with maybe 15 years of experience who may mentor 2 to 3, junior bankers, so to say. And I think it is largely on the job, of learning that happens, because you learn through experience and, engaging with situations and then solving them. I think so for us that is critical, which is on the job, and these are long gestation. So if you're a junior banker, you may not have any targets, etc., for some period of time, till the time we feel that as a firm, you can represent the brand. From a classroom perspective, obviously, we would have multiple in-house programs that would go in, which would typically take care of the domain bit and on the relationship skill bit, both. I think, and for us, both are critical. So we spend fair bit of time trying to figure out that how can you become a trusted advisor. Trusted advisor is not a scientist who would come and rattle out formulas, but it is how do you really build relationship and, get the trust of the client. So, fair bit of work happens and workshops happen on those aspects as well.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. So, but I have a lot of questions, interesting questions left. So we'll go for a quick fire round from here on. Quickly, I mean, for a qualified, for a fresher rather. I mean, most of the wealth management companies usually prefer mid-level people with books and all. But a fresher, someone who wants to build a glittering career in this, what will be your advice? What route should he or she be taking? Assuming he's not going to be hired immediately by a wealth management company. So how does he reach there?
So I think point number one is that they have to realize that this is a, it's a business of vintage, and there are no shortcuts. And if you see all three of us, I think all of us have spent significant amount of times in, in our firms in which we have been. She spoke about those 7-year fund, etc. You have to go with that intent, in the market that, I am here for life and I want to build a career, we spoke about second generation, bankers. And I think that is the trend globally. So you will have to own those clients, you will have to build that business. And if you go with that mindset that you want to work with your clients on a long-term basis, I think that to us is the clincher. So my advice to, all freshers would be that when you start your career, please go out with that mindset. If you go that, you will be a winner.
If I can just add to what Anupam said, I think, so while I'm pretty much new to the whole industry, but see, my original and initial sense is it's extremely myopic. So like you have the old set of guys who have a chip on the block because they think they've arrived in life, they manage an X amount of AUM and all of that. So obviously those guys are very pricey. And then an organization takes a lot more risk when they are actually onboarding new guys because it's a very high fixed cost model, right? So somewhere you got to balance things out. Now the other challenge is you normally go and meet people whose net worth is about $10 million, $50 million. Now that guy is thinking, what is this kid going to teach me, right? Because I already have, $50 million or I have $10 million and I have the kind of money that I have. So clearly customer segmentation, segregation is extremely important. But having said that, I think the most critical element to me, and I would somewhere disagree with the other two guys, I mean my esteemed panelists here, but I think knowledge is extremely important. If you don't have, so I would rather start with the domain knowledge first and I would rather focus there, because when you are engaging with the customer, unless and until you don't understand the domain, you don't have the ability to go and converse with that customer across asset classes. What does it mean? What impact does it have? That guy is not going to give you business. It's as simple as that. You might have the relationship, but relationships do not necessarily bring you business. It will get you business at some point in time, provided the guy sees that yes, this guy can actually add value to my life. Otherwise, he's not going to really spend time. So I think as an organization, if you onboard a fresher, clearly, the fire in the belly, the gut, And it's all about gut, right? I mean, how do you know this guy, okay, he may display a lot of fire in his belly, but how do you really know this guy is actually going to deliver? Which is where the whole organization needs to actually rally in terms of all their processes and stuff like that to ensure that this guy gets successful. But he needs to put in a lot of effort.
So,
sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
even I. So don't, take us wrong that in our order, and it is out of, again I'm saying experience. Is finally domain is basic. You need to have it. Otherwise, you are not in private banking. I mean,
Correct.
so and I'm just clarifying to everyone here that that to us is basic, that you need to have.
The reason I say this, Anupam, I'll tell you what. So I've met almost about 150 private bankers, okay, in the last 3 months across the industry. And I've only asked them one simple question. Okay, you please tell me what's the difference between a return on capital employed and a return on invested capital. And I have not got an answer. They just look at me, right? So, what are you talking? I mean, it's like, so, there would be maybe one smart aleck guy who might have just come and told me, okay, this is what it means. But they don't know. I mean, so they might be great relationship guys,
No,
I just have one more point to make, so I sort of agree with you, but again, as Anupam said, you sort of assume that in this business, a hygiene level of understanding is required. The point that you make is right, is the people walking through the door, they may think they know everything, but the basics are often missing.
Correct.
The organization's ability to augment that, we are very confident about. So when a person is walking through the door, I don't check his CFA credentials. If he's not done, is fine. If he has basic intelligence, I know that within 3 to 6 months to 1 year of rigorous training and actual client situation case studies, I'll be able to prepare him. But I was very beautifully told to me by another client that Warren Buffett had a wealth manager, right, and who now manages a lot of his money. Now, what can you teach that man who's supposed to be, in another orbit in terms of what he thinks? And the question that he asked when he got the account was, what is the problem that I can solve for you? So I think the ability to impart technical knowledge is the organization's responsibility, and you've got to ensure that the person has that bare minimum thing before he goes and meets a client. But that's not what we'll specifically be looking at when a person is coming through the door, because I think I can impart that. What I cannot impart is the resourcefulness, the ability to build an ecosystem, and ability to actually go and have the tenacity to go and create an ecosystem for himself. So that's all that there is to it. So yes, no disagreement. Technical knowledge, obviously there is someone who can, where you discuss cup of coffee and the weather and all of that, and hope to close a complex conversation. You actually owe a huge amount of responsibility, where the clients are trusting with you with the most intimate, and a lot of times with what they have created over generations to you. That's a very, very serious responsibility that you need to be prepared for that. But just to be doubly sure, so that is hygiene. People walking through the door may not be aware. A lot of people with a lot more experience find it very, very difficult to accept the fact that they don't know enough. But this is the organization's responsibility. You've got your process to ensure that the person gets to learn all of that before he goes and knocks the door. But from a RM point of view, when I'm looking at someone to face a client, that's a skill that can be imparted.
Yeah, you see, the reason why this is important is, I was just looking at the recent ENY study. There are about 200,000 ultra HNIs in India. And that will be, say, 200,000 families, right? I'm not sure we have the right count in India from a wealth management perspective to cater to these guys' needs. So at one side, you have a very lopsided opportunity, which is huge. And on the other side, you don't have the right talent, or maybe not necessarily the right mix of talent, who can go and address that particular opportunity. So there's a clear dichotomy. So, that.
So I was coming to that point only. In fact, my last question for the panel before you open it to the audience. In our regular interactions, I've seen a lot of independent financial advisors who created a good brand for themselves. They've become authorities over the last few years, writing in newspapers, featuring in all the, all such sessions and all. We've not seen too many private bankers or wealth managers creating a brand for themselves, right. Becoming known as star private bankers. So, quickly, tips from all of you. I mean, how does one create himself into a wealth management brand? First of all, do companies allow it, or are there some strict guidelines in terms of no, you can't speak or you can't talk? I mean, of course, in terms of technical things, no, but there's so many more things a candidate, a manager can do to build his brand as well as the company's brand. So, quick tips on that. I mean,
I've done a whole lot of talking, so I'll go last.
all of you.
So I think, Anupam, Aditya, this is a great opportunity. Thank you for inviting us here. So, there's a video camera. You guys can you can obviously flash this, flash the three of us. So that will probably get us some attention.
I'm talking to juniors. I'm not talking about you all.
And,
I'm talking to the juniors. I mean, the people who are making careers mid-level, how do they create a brand for themselves? How do they start? I mean, why can't we have star wealth managers who are known? Like, I can tell you financial planners. There's a Gaurav Mashruwala. No one knew him 10 years ago. Today, everyone knows him. A Karthik Zaveri, a Arnab Pandya. We don't hear names like that in private banking.
Yeah,
So if I may,
Why is that not happening?
sure. So if I may,
of course.
yeah. So one is, so there are two aspects to it. One is the substance and then is the promotion bit of it.
Yeah.
So from the substance bit of it, I think it is critical that, as I mentioned, that one needs to spend fair bit of time in the market and in the network to be well known. And it is a network. So again, I'm saying networking is again taken as, an easy thing. And I can tell you out of experience that working the network in our business is one of the most critical things to be successful. And it is just not about, with the clients that you're spending time with, but it is also amongst the peer set, the industry, the manufacturers, all of them, that one needs to do that. And the second bit of it is that once you've created that network and you're well established, from a credential perspective, how do you really let the market know that you're there? And from there, I think, ISEC is one of the largest leading investment banking firms. And I have seen it personally, how investment bankers position themselves. So right from writing articles to blogging to panel, all of it, I think and today with technology, I mean, reaching out is the easiest thing. You really need not come here on a panel to really reach out. You have a view and you could air it. And I think that is where one would need to spend time, allocate resources, and think that this is one of the core areas that they would want to do it. So it's all about prioritizing and allocating time and then working on it.
Sure. Arpita?
No, I think it's the most important question that you sort of put your finger on in terms of ability. Private bankers, are they? So from an organization point of view, we completely believe in giving space to create personal brands, because ultimately that's what will outlive most of, and how can you sort of support it and help create personal brands for people. And so the proposition for a person at the margin who is coming in is, you have a platform which you can ping for whatever client requirement is there. There are controls and there's an overlay and there will be support that will be there. Ultimately, the face to the client is going to be the person who is leading the relationship. So yes, we have started this journey. We already are known by people. So Vaishvik Tokrani and Amit Rathi, two employees from our firm, people would know them as Amit Rathi working for Centrum and Vaishvik Tokrani working from Centrum rather than the other way around. And a dream for us is if actually that's how most of our employees are perceived, because that's when they're dropped, anchor, lock, stock, barrel. The organization is there to support them, to augment whatever else can be supported from their point of view. But I think organization brands, personal brands are a must if you wanted to be in this career for a very, very long time. And it's a very beautiful business model that the current IFAs have. Scalable or not is a question for another day. But I think ultimately in a business of trust, as personal as it gets is where I think you'll be able to scale up. Sure.
See, I think to a large extent, Aditya, I think it's a very interesting question. Even I didn't think of this, but when you look at most of the global magazines, there are private wealth managers who are advertised or who kind of recognized on various forums and stuff like that. But to a large extent, I think this does happen underground in India. So because this business is a lot relationship driven and reference based. So if somebody is doing a great job, there would be he would at least get about 10, 15 references, right, from his clients. It's just that there's no face to it. Sorry. It's just that there's no, it's just that there's no face to or a forum to a private banker or a private wealth manager where he could be kind of, advertised or displayed or talked about. But yeah, I mean, surely I think we will evolve over a period of time. This will happen. Sure. There's just one guy in the industry who manages what, $70 million, right? And then you have the next guy who's probably 10% of that, right? So there is an opportunity. And I'm told that this guy who manages $70 million doesn't have time to manage money. So while he's got people queuing up, right, but he's saying, I don't want customers because I have enough on my plate. So, yeah, I mean,
Sure. So on that note, I'll quickly open this floor for questions. We can have 2 questions at the max. So anyone here? Oh, I think the discussion was pretty exhaustive. So no questions. All right. So
Thank you.
thank you,
Thanks.
panelists, for joining us, and we quickly move on to the next session.